I am Brooke, 32 years old, and I will never forget what happened at my family's extravagant backyard barbecue. The aroma of grilled steaks filled the air as I approached my mother with hopeful eyes. Smiling, I asked, "Did you remember my birthday?" My mother looked surprised. "Oh, was that today? This is for your sister's pregnancy." My sister Amanda giggled beside her. Without a word, tears fell as I walked away. But a few days later, my family saw something and froze in shock. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button, because family betrayals can happen to anyone. Growing up in Seattle, my childhood was privileged in many ways, but emotionally impoverished in others. My father James built his real estate development company from scratch, turning it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise by the time I was 10. My mother Diana, with her perfect blonde hair and country club memberships, was known as the ultimate socialite hostess in our upscale neighborhood. And then there was my younger sister Amanda, 4 years my junior at 28, who somehow managed to embody everything my parents valued: beauty, social grace, and most importantly, compliance. Our sprawling home in Bellevue overlooked Lake Washington, with manicured gardens and a pool area that frequently hosted corporate events and neighborhood gatherings. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. But inside those walls, I always felt like I was living in the shadows. "Brooke, why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my adolescence. While Amanda was taking ballet and winning piano competitions, I was volunteering at animal shelters and dreaming of becoming a doctor. My interests never aligned with my mother's vision of what a proper young lady from our social circle should be pursuing. By the time I finished high school, I had learned to keep my achievements to myself. When I was accepted into the nursing program at University of Washington, my parents attended the orientation mostly to network with other affluent families. When I graduated with honors, they showed up late and left early for Amanda's sorority fundraiser. Now, as a pediatric nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital, I find deep fulfillment in caring for others, perhaps because I know what it feels like to be overlooked. The irony isn't lost on me that I spend my days ensuring children feel seen and valued, while my own family has never mastered that art. Birthdays in our household were always elaborate affairs, at least for everyone except me. My father's birthday meant a weekend yacht trip with business associates. My mother's birthday traditionally involved a catered luncheon with her social circle. Amanda's birthdays were legendary-themed extravaganzas that grew more elaborate each year. Mine were typically acknowledged with a store-bought cake after everyone was too tired to make a fuss. This year felt different, though. I had dropped hints for weeks mentioning the specific date multiple times in conversation. I even texted my mother a link to a restaurant I'd been wanting to try, saying, "This would be perfect for a special occasion like a birthday on the 15th. I was turning 32, hardly a milestone year, but something in me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, this would be the year they'd make me feel special. The morning of my birthday, I spent extra time getting ready. I bought a new sundress, deep blue with tiny white flowers that brought out the color of my eyes. I styled my chestnut hair in loose waves instead of my usual practical ponytail for work. I even applied makeup, something I rarely bothered with outside of special occasions. Looking in the mirror, I allowed myself to feel a flutter of excitement. Surely they wouldn't forget again this year. When I received a text from my mother around noon asking if I could come to the house around 4 because they were having a little gathering, my heart soared. They remembered. They were throwing me a surprise party. I responded immediately that I'd be there, practically floating through my remaining shift at the hospital. My best friend Taylor called as I was driving home to change. We'd met in nursing school, and she knew all too well my complicated family dynamics. "Don't get your hopes up too high, Brooke," she warned gently. "I just don't want to see you hurt again." I know, I assured her. But they specifically invited me over on my actual birthday, and Mom mentioned a gathering. What else could it be? Taylor's silence on the other end spoke volumes, but I chose to ignore it. "I'll call you later and tell you all about my surprise party," I said with forced brightness before hanging up. When I pulled into the circular driveway of my parents' home, there were already several cars parked there. My pulse quickened at the sight of decorations visible through the back gate. Blue and white balloons tied to the fence posts, my favorite colors. A large congratulations banner stretched across the patio. I almost couldn't believe it. They had actually remembered and gone all out. Walking through the side gate to the backyard, I paused to take in the scene. The space had been transformed with flowers, balloons, and twinkling string lights despite it being daytime. Tables were laden with elaborate finger foods, champagne was chilling in silver buckets, and in the center of the main table sat a beautiful two-tier cake with blue frosting. My mother was directing the catering staff while my father was at the grill flipping steaks with the focused attention he usually reserved for business negotiations. My sister Amanda stood nearby looking radiant in a flowing white dress that accentuated her slight pregnancy bump. She was surrounded by a small group of guests including our Aunt Susan and Uncle Robert, along with some family friends I recognized from various social gatherings over the years. For a moment, I just stood there taking it all in. After years of disappointment, my family had finally remembered my birthday and thrown me a beautiful party. Tears of happiness pricked at my eyes as I stepped forward, a smile spreading across my face. Amanda spotted me first. "Oh, look who's here," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. There was something in her tone that made my stomach tighten slightly, but I pushed the feeling aside. My mother turned and waved me over. "Brooke, perfect timing. We're just about to make the announcement." Announcement. That seemed odd for a birthday party, but I made my way across the lawn still smiling. As I approached the main group, I noticed my mother's friends giving me polite nods rather than the enthusiastic birthday wishes I expected. That was when I saw it. The cake didn't say "Happy Birthday, Brooke" as I'd imagined. Instead, in elegant script, it read, "Congratulations, Amanda and Jason." My steps faltered, but I kept moving forward, confusion replacing my earlier excitement. As I reached the group, I looked at my mother and asked the question that would change everything. Smiling, though already I could feel it wavering, I asked, "Did you remember my birthday?" The moment stretched between us like a thread about to snap. My mother's perfectly made-up face registered surprise. Then something that might have been guilt quickly masked by a dismissive laugh. "Oh, was that today? This is for your sister's pregnancy," she said, gesturing toward Amanda, who giggled beside her. The sound of her laughter cut through me like glass. I stood there surrounded by family and friends, feeling completely alone. The beautiful cake, the decorations in my favorite colors, the elaborate spread of food, none of it was for me. Once again, I had been forgotten. "We're celebrating Amanda's pregnancy," my father announced, coming over from the grill. "She's just had her first trimester screening and everything looks perfect." He beamed at my sister with naked pride. Amanda stepped forward, her hand resting on her slightly swollen belly. "Actually, we have even more exciting news," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "The doctor confirmed yesterday. We're having twins." A chorus of gasps and congratulations erupted around us. My mother clapped her hands in delight while my father let out a booming laugh of joy. "Twins! Our first grandchildren, and we're getting two at once." I remained frozen in place, a spectator to my own erasure. It wasn't just that they had forgotten my birthday. They had scheduled another celebration on top of it, completely overriding my existence. The physical pain of this betrayal surprised me. My chest felt tight, my throat constricting as I struggled to maintain composure. My mother's friend Judith approached Amanda with a gift bag. "This is just a little something to start the baby's library," she said. One by one, guests began producing presents they had brought for the expecting parents. I watched as my sister was showered with attention and gifts, her pregnancy apparently worthy of celebration in a way my birth never seemed to be. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent the morning getting ready for a party that wasn't mine, excited about finally being seen by my family. "Excuse me?" I whispered to no one in particular, turning away from the festive scene. No one noticed as I walked back toward the house, tears beginning to spill down my cheeks. I made my way through the kitchen where catering staff were preparing more food. One of the servers, a young woman probably still in college, gave me a sympathetic look. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. I nodded automatically, unable to speak. How could I explain to a stranger what I could barely acknowledge to myself, that my own family had not only forgotten my birthday, but had scheduled another celebration on top of it? Making my way upstairs to what had once been my bedroom, now converted to a guest room with barely a trace of my existence, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. The tears came freely now, hot and bitter. I slid down to sit on the floor, hugging my knees to my chest, like I used to do as a child when trying to make myself invisible. After a while, curiosity pushed through my pain. I stood and began looking around the room that had once been mine. All my posters and photographs had been removed years ago when I moved out for college, but there used to be a built-in bookshelf where my mother had displayed some family photos, including a few of me at various ages. I walked over to it, searching for any evidence that I had once belonged in this house. What I found instead stunned me. Every single photograph that had once included me had been replaced with pictures of Amanda. Her graduation, her wedding, her honeymoon, and now several framed ultrasound images prominently displayed on the middle shelf. It was as if I had been systematically erased from the family narrative. The discovery triggered memories of similar betrayals throughout my life. My 10th birthday, when my parents had taken Amanda to Disneyland because she'd been leaving me with my grandmother. My 16th, which coincided with Amanda's dance recital, resulting in a hurried celebration at a fast food restaurant afterward. My college graduation, which my parents had attended but left halfway through because Amanda had called with boyfriend troubles. A pattern I had tried so hard to rationalize away was suddenly crystal clear. I wasn't just overlooked. I was actively unseen. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and called the one person who had never failed to see me. Taylor, I managed when she answered, my voice breaking on her name. Oh, Brooke, they forgot again, didn't they? Her voice was gentle, knowing. Worse, I whispered. They're throwing a party for Amanda's pregnancy. On my birthday. They didn't even realize. Taylor was quiet for a moment. Pack a bag, she said finally. Come stay with me for a while. You shouldn't be alone tonight, and you definitely shouldn't stay there. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I'll be there in an hour. And Brooke, happy birthday. I've got ice cream and your favorite movie queued up. Through my tears, I smiled faintly. What would I do without you? Fortunately, you'll never have to find out, she replied. Now get your things and come over. Your real family is waiting. After hanging up with Taylor, I stood in what used to be my bedroom, listening to the sounds of celebration continuing in the backyard. Laughter floated up through the open window, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and occasional applause. The party for Amanda was in full swing, and no one had even noticed my absence. I moved quietly through the room, gathering nothing, since everything that had once been mine was long gone. Instead, I went to my parents' bedroom and borrowed my mother's small overnight bag from her closet. If she noticed it missing, she would assume she had misplaced it. If she didn't notice, well, that would just be one more confirmation of what I already knew. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, erasing the tracks of tears and the smudged makeup I had applied with such hope hours earlier. The woman who stared back at me from the mirror looked hollow-eyed and pale but resolute. Something had shifted inside me. The pain was still there, a throbbing wound in my chest, but alongside it was a new feeling: determination. I moved through the house like a ghost, picking up a few essentials I had left behind over the years. A favorite book from the living room shelves. A small jewelry box my grandmother had given me that my mother had appropriated for her desk. A photo album from the hall closet that contained the only evidence I could find that I had once been part of this family. No one saw me slip out the front door. No one called after me as I placed the borrowed bag in my car and drove away from the house where I had grown up, but never truly belonged. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, leaving unnoticed from a celebration I hadn't been invited to on the day of my birth that everyone had forgotten. Taylor's apartment was in Queen Anne, a 30-minute drive from my parents' Bellevue mansion. The difference between the neighborhoods always struck me. Bellevue with its manicured perfection, and Queen Anne with its quirky charm and character. I had always felt more at home in the latter. When I arrived, Taylor was waiting at the door with open arms and a birthday cupcake with a single candle. "Make a wish," she said as I stepped inside. "I think I'm too old for wishes," I replied, but I blew out the candle anyway. No one's too old for wishes, especially on their birthday. She led me to her couch, where, true to her word, she had ice cream waiting and my favorite movie queued up on the TV. That night, curled up on Taylor's sofa bed, I let myself fully feel the magnitude of what had happened. Not just today's betrayal, but the lifetime of subtle and not-so-subtle messages that I somehow mattered less. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by waves of hurt that crashed over me when I least expected them. Morning brought no relief, just the dull realization that I would need to go to work and somehow function normally, despite feeling like I was breaking apart inside. Taylor made coffee and toast, watching me with concern. "You could call in sick," she suggested. "No one would blame you." I shook my head. "The kids are expecting me." As a pediatric nurse, I worked primarily with long-term patients, children with chronic conditions who counted on seeing familiar faces. Besides, I need the normalcy. Going to work turned out to be the right decision. There's something about the resilience of children facing serious illness that puts adult problems into perspective. My 12-year-old patient Sophie, battling leukemia for the second time, asked why my eyes looked sad. "It's my birthday, but I'm feeling a little lonely," I admitted, simplifying the complex tangle of emotions I was experiencing. Sophie's face lit up. "Your birthday. Wait right here." She disappeared into the playroom and returned with a handmade card she and the other children had apparently been working on during art therapy. "We were going to give you this at lunch, but you need it now." The card, covered in glitter and wobbly handwriting, brought fresh tears to my eyes. But these were different from yesterday's tears. These were tears of being seen, of mattering to someone. Throughout the day, my phone remained silent. No belated birthday wishes from my parents or sister. No acknowledgement of my absence from the party. It was as if I had never existed at all. Until evening, when my mother finally called as I was leaving the hospital. "Brooke, where did you go yesterday? You just disappeared," she said, sounding mildly annoyed rather than concerned. "You didn't notice I was gone until today?" I asked, the hurt evident in my voice despite my attempt to sound neutral. There was a pause. "Well, we were all very busy with Amanda's celebration. Speaking of which, we're planning her baby shower for next month, and I could really use your help. You're so good at organizing things. Could you come over this weekend to discuss the details?" The request stunned me into momentary silence. Not only had she failed to acknowledge my birthday or apologize for forgetting it, but she was now asking me to help plan yet another celebration for my sister. "I'm busy this weekend," I said finally, "and probably for the foreseeable future." "Brooke, don't be difficult. This is an important time for your sister. You should be happy for her." "I am happy for her," I replied truthfully. "But I need some space right now." I ended the call before she could respond, feeling both shaky and somehow stronger. Setting a boundary, however small, was new territory for me. My father texted an hour later, not to check on me or apologize, but to ask if I still had copies of some family documents he needed for tax purposes. My sister posted elaborately staged pregnancy photos on social media, tagging me with, "Wish you were here, sis," as if I had chosen to miss the celebration rather than been forgotten and excluded. These interactions only reinforced what yesterday had made painfully clear. I was an afterthought to my family, valued only for what I could provide, rather than who I was. My actual birthday passed with only Taylor acknowledging it. We had a quiet dinner at her apartment, followed by cake and presents that she had thoughtfully arranged. It was simple, but genuine, everything my family gatherings had never been. A week after the barbecue disaster, I started therapy. Dr. Morgan was a calm, insightful woman who specialized in family trauma. In our first session, she listened attentively as I poured out the story of my birthday and the lifetime of similar experiences that had preceded it. "What you're describing sounds like a pattern of emotional neglect," she said when I finished. "It's particularly damaging because it's often invisible. There's no physical abuse, no dramatic scenes to point to, just a persistent absence of what should have been there." Her validation of my experience brought fresh tears. For so long, I had questioned whether I was being oversensitive or demanding too much attention. Hearing a professional confirm that what I had experienced was genuinely harmful was both painful and liberating. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Morgan helped me recognize other patterns in my family dynamics. How I had been cast in the role of the responsible, independent one who didn't need attention, while Amanda was positioned as fragile and requiring constant support. How my achievements were downplayed while hers were celebrated. how I had internalized the message that I needed to earn love through usefulness rather than deserving it simply for being me. Your worth isn't determined by your family's recognition, Dr. Morgan told me during one particularly difficult session. That's a lesson many adults struggle with their entire lives. I was beginning to understand this intellectually, but emotionally, I still felt the pull of wanting my family to see me, to value me as they valued Amanda. That desire had shaped so much of my life, influencing my choice of career, my relationships even where I lived, always within easy reach if my family should suddenly decide they needed me. I think I need to confront them, I said to Dr. Morgan during our fourth session. Not to change them. I'm starting to accept that might not be possible, but for me. So I can stop wondering if there's something I could have done differently, Doctor. Morgan nodded thoughtfully. Confrontation can be healing when approached with realistic expectations. What would a successful confrontation look like to you? I considered this. Being heard, having them acknowledge what they've done even if they don't change, standing up for myself instead of just disappearing like I always do. That sounds like a healthy goal, she agreed. Let's talk about how to approach this in a way that protects your emotional well-being. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with Dr. Morgan to develop healthy confrontation strategies. We focused on I statements rather than accusations, specific examples, rather than generalizations, and most importantly, managing my expectations about the outcome. Your family may become defensive, she warned. They may deny, minimize, or try to turn things around on you. The important thing to remember is that their reaction doesn't invalidate your experience. And together we created a list of specific instances when I had been overlooked and how they had made me feel. My 16th birthday when my parents attended Amanda's dance recital instead. My college graduation when they left halfway through. Countless family dinners where my achievements went unacknowledged while Amanda's were celebrated. And most recently, the birthday barbecue that had become a pregnancy announcement party. Focus on the pattern, Dr. Morgan advised. Individual incidents can be explained away, but the consistent pattern over time tells the real story. I practiced the confrontation dialogue with Taylor, who played the roles of my parents and sister with uncomfortable accuracy. "But we've given you everything," she exclaimed in a pitch-perfect imitation of my mother's defensive tone. "How can you be so ungrateful?" I took a deep breath, sticking to the script we had prepared. I'm grateful for the material advantages I've had. What I'm talking about is emotional support and recognition. I needed to be seen and valued for who I am, not what I could do for the family. Taylor nodded approvingly before switching to my father's dismissive business tone. "This is ancient history. Why bring up the past? What's the point?" Again, I stayed focused. The past shapes the present. I'm bringing this up now because the pattern continues and it's damaging our relationship. I want something different going forward. Between therapy sessions and rehearsals with Taylor, I also did my own research on family dynamics and narcissistic family structures. So much of what I read felt like it had been written specifically about my family. The golden child and scapegoat roles, the conditional love, the gaslighting when legitimate concerns were raised. I also stumbled across some information that shed new light on my family's current situation. Through a mutual acquaintance who worked at my father's company, I learned that the business was facing serious financial difficulties. Despite the continued lavish spending and appearances of prosperity, they had been forced to lay off staff and were struggling to meet loan obligations. Even more surprisingly, I discovered through social media detective work that all might not be well between Amanda and her husband Jason. Though they presented a united front at the pregnancy celebration, there were rumors among common friends that he was considering leaving her overwhelmed by the prospect of twins and unhappy in the marriage. My parents were apparently working overtime to keep this information quiet, concerned about how it would look to their social circle. These discoveries didn't change my resolve to confront my family, but they did help me understand the context better. Perhaps the over-the-top celebration of Amanda's pregnancy was partly a distraction from the cracks appearing in their perfect facade. After 3 weeks of preparation, I decided it was time. Sunday dinner had always been mandatory in our family, the one time everyone was expected to be present regardless of other commitments. I had been conspicuously absent since the barbecue, which had surely been noticed, even if no one had reached out to check on me beyond my mother's baby shower planning call. I texted my mother on Saturday. "I'll be coming to dinner tomorrow. There are some things we need to discuss." Her response was immediate and typically oblivious. "Wonderful. I was just thinking we haven't seen you in ages. Your father is grilling steaks." No acknowledgement of why I might have been absent. No recognition that anything was amiss. It was exactly what I expected, and somehow that made it easier. Taylor insisted on driving me to my parents' house and waiting outside. "I don't trust myself not to storm in if I hear yelling," she admitted, "but I want to be close by if you need me." As we pulled up to the circular driveway, I felt surprisingly calm. The weeks of preparation had done their job. I knew what I wanted to say, and more importantly, I knew that my worth wasn't dependent on how my family received it. "You've got this," Taylor said, squeezing my hand. "Remember, you're setting yourself free regardless of how they respond." I nodded, taking a deep breath before stepping out of the car. The walk to the front door felt significant, like crossing a threshold into a new phase of my life. I paused before ringing the doorbell, gathering my courage and reminding myself of what Dr. Morgan had said. "Your truth deserves to be spoken, even if they're not ready to hear it." With that thought firmly in mind, I pressed the doorbell and waited for whatever would come next. The chimes echoed inside the house, followed by the click of heels on marble. My mother opened the door, her surprise at seeing me evident despite her text response yesterday. "Brooke, you're actually here." She stepped back to let me in. We were just about to sit down. The foyer was unchanged, grand chandelier, sweeping staircase, family portraits lining the walls. I noticed for the first time how few of those portraits included me alone, while Amanda had several solo glamour shots prominently displayed. "Everyone's on the patio," my mother continued, leading the way through the house. "Amanda's been asking about you." I doubted that very much, but I followed silently, mentally rehearsing my opening statements. The scene on the patio was familiar. My father at the head of the table, Amanda and Jason seated together on one side. The table was set with the good china flowers arranged in the center. Everything perfect on the surface, as always. "Look who finally decided to join us," my father said, his tone making it clear he found my absence inconvenient rather than concerning. Amanda smiled brightly. "Brooke, where have you been hiding? I've tried to tag you in so many pregnancy updates." I took my usual seat across from Amanda, noticing how Jason looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting between his wife and his phone. The tension beneath the perfect family tableau was suddenly obvious to me, though I'd been blind to it for years. "Would you like some wine?" my mother asked, already reaching for the bottle. "No, thank you," I replied. "I'd prefer to keep a clear head for what I need to discuss." That got their attention. My father put down his knife and fork. My mother's hand stilled on the wine bottle, and Amanda's perpetual smile faltered slightly. "Sounds serious," my father said with a forced chuckle. "Tax problem, legal issue at work." Of course, his first thought was that I needed practical help, not that I might have emotional concerns to address. "It's not that kind of discussion," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I want to talk about what happened 3 weeks ago and really about what's been happening my entire life." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother recovered first, reaching for her own wine glass. "If this is about Amanda's celebration, I thought we were past that. It was unfortunate timing, but these things happen." "It wasn't unfortunate timing," I countered. "It was my birthday. A fact that none of you remembered or acknowledged even after I pointed it out." "Birthdays aren't such a big deal once you're an adult," my father said dismissively. "I can't remember the last time anyone made a fuss over mine." This was blatantly untrue. His last birthday had involved a chartered yacht and 24 guests, but I refused to be derailed. "This isn't about one birthday," I continued, sticking to the script I had practiced. "It's about a pattern that's existed as long as I can remember. A pattern where Amanda's needs, achievements, and milestones are celebrated while mine are forgotten or minimized." Amanda's face flushed. "That's not fair." You're always the responsible one, the independent one. You don't need the attention like I do." Her words confirmed exactly what Dr. Morgan had identified, the family roles we had been assigned and had played out for decades. "Everyone needs recognition and support," I said quietly. "Everyone needs to feel valued for who they are, not just what they can do for others." My mother's expression hardened. "If this is going to be an attack on your sister, I think we should change the subject. She's pregnant with twins, for heaven's sake. She doesn't need this stress." "I'm not attacking Amanda," I clarified. "I'm trying to explain how I've felt in this family. Overlooked. Unseen. Like I matter less somehow." My father sighed heavily. "Brooke, we've always been proud of you. You've never needed our help or attention. You've always been the strong one, the one we could count on to handle things on your own." "That doesn't mean I didn't want or need your support," I replied, feeling a catch in my throat. Being independent wasn't a choice. It was a survival strategy because I learned early on that I couldn't count on getting what I needed from my family. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Jason looked increasingly uncomfortable while Amanda stared at her plate. My parents exchanged a glance that contained some communication I couldn't decipher. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice different than I'd ever heard it. "There's something you should know, Brooke. Something we've never told you." My father shifted in his chair. "Diana, I don't think this is the time." "If not now, when?" my mother retorted, then turned back to me. "Brooke, you were adopted." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? After we were married, we had difficulty conceiving." My mother continued, her composure cracking slightly. "We tried for years, saw specialists, went through treatments. Nothing worked. We were about to start the formal adoption process when a distant cousin of your father's contacted us. She was 19, unmarried, pregnant, and not in a position to raise a child. We arranged a private adoption." I struggled to process this revelation. "So, I'm not biologically related to us, no," my father finished. "Though legally, of course, you are completely our daughter." Then 4 years later, when we had completely given up hope, Amanda was conceived naturally. It was unexpected, a miracle, really," my mother added, reaching across the table to squeeze Amanda's hand. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. "So Amanda is your biological child and I'm not. That's why she's always been the favorite." "We don't have favorites," my father said automatically, but without conviction. "James," my mother said quietly, "let's not lie to her now." She turned to me, her eyes showing genuine emotion for perhaps the first time in our relationship. "We never meant to hurt you, Brooke. But yes, there was always something different in how we felt about Amanda. We tried to compensate by making sure you had everything you needed materially. Except love." I said the words escaping before I could stop them. "Except recognition. Except the basic acknowledgement that I mattered too." Amanda was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "I always knew," she whispered. "Not that you were adopted. They never told me that. But that they treated us differently. I felt guilty about it, but I also liked being the special one." She looked up at me, her expression surprisingly vulnerable. "And I was jealous of you too, Brooke. You were always so strong, so independent. You had real friends, a career you cared about. I've just been playing the role they expected of me, trying to be perfect, because it was the only thing I thought I was good at." This confession from Amanda stunned me almost as much as the adoption revelation. For all these years, I had seen only her privileged position in the family, not the golden cage it represented. "There's something else you should know," my father said heavily. "The company is in serious trouble. We've been keeping up appearances, but the truth is, we may have to sell this house within the year." My mother shot him an angry look. "James, was that necessary right now?" "If we're finally being honest, let's be completely honest," he replied. "Brooke deserves that much." The conversation continued in this vein, layers of family secrets and hidden truths emerging one after another. Amanda admitted that Jason had threatened to leave her when they discovered she was pregnant with twins. My parents acknowledged that much of their social life was now financed by credit cards as they tried desperately to maintain their status in the community. Through it all, I listened with a strange sense of detachment. The family I had longed to be fully accepted by was built on appearances, secrets, and conditional love. The revelation about my adoption explained much, but it didn't excuse the years of emotional neglect. When the initial flood of confessions had subsided, I spoke again, my voice calm and resolved. Thank you for finally telling me the truth. I have a lot to process, and I need some space to do that. What does that mean? My mother asked anxiously. It means I won't be coming to Sunday dinners for a while. It means I need time to figure out what kind of relationship I want with all of you going forward, if any. If any? My father looked genuinely shocked. Brooke, despite everything, we're still your family. I stood up from the table feeling lighter than I had in years. Biology and legal documents don't make a family. Love, respect, and recognition do. I need to find those things whether with you or elsewhere. I left them sitting at their perfect table with their perfect place settings, the facade finally cracked beyond repair. Taylor was waiting in her car just as promised. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. Home, she asked simply. I nodded, realizing that home was no longer the house I had just left. Home was wherever I was seen, valued, and loved for exactly who I was. The weeks following my confrontation with my family were transformative in ways I couldn't have anticipated. With Dr. Morgan's guidance, I began to explore the implications of learning I was adopted at 32 years old. The revelation answered many questions about my childhood, but also opened new ones about my origins and identity. Many adult adoptees go through a period of searching after learning about their adoption. Dr. Morgan explained during one of our sessions. It's completely normal to want to know where you came from. With her encouragement, I began researching my adoption background. Since it had been a private arrangement through family connections, there were no agency records to access. However, my father, in a surprising gesture of cooperation, provided me with my birth mother's name and last known contact information. Her name was Linda Carson, and according to my father, she had been a college student when she became pregnant with me. They had lost touch after the adoption was finalized, but he believed she had eventually settled in Portland, Oregon. It took me several days to work up the courage to reach out. What would I say to the woman who had given birth to me and then given me away? Would she even want to hear from me? What if she rejected me just as my adoptive family had? Taylor sat with me as I drafted and redrafted an email, finally settling on something simple and direct. My name is Brooke Hamilton. I recently learned that I was adopted and that you are my birth mother. I would like to meet you if you're open to that. If not, I understand and will respect your decision. The reply came faster than I expected just hours later. Brooke, I have thought about you every day for 32 years. Yes, I want to meet you, whenever and wherever you want. With love, Linda. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Seattle the following weekend. Linda offered to come to me, saying she made the trip from Portland frequently to visit friends. As the day approached, my anxiety grew. I had already had one family disappoint me deeply. Was I setting myself up for more pain? Dr. Morgan helped me manage my expectations. Remember, this meeting is about information gathering and possibly connection. It's not about finding a replacement mother or instant family. Stay open, but grounded. The woman who walked into the coffee shop that Saturday was not what I had imagined. Linda Carson was in her early 50s with streaks of gray in her auburn hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She spotted me immediately, and I knew she recognized something of herself in me. Perhaps the shape of our eyes, or the way we both tucked our hair behind our ears in exactly the same way. Brooke, she said simply, and then we were hugging two strangers connected by blood and separated by decades, finding our way back to each other. Over the next several hours, Linda shared her story. She had been 19, a sophomore in college on a partial scholarship when she became pregnant. The father had been her boyfriend of just a few months, who made it clear he wasn't ready for parenthood. Her parents, strict and religious, had given her an ultimatum: give the baby up for adoption or be cut off completely. I wanted to keep you, she told me, her eyes filled with tears. But I had no money, no support system, no way to finish my education and provide for you. When James and Diana were suggested as potential adoptive parents, they seemed perfect. Wealthy, stable, eager for a child. I thought I was giving you a better life than I could. I reached across the table and took her hand. "You did what you thought was best." She nodded, squeezing my hand in return. After the adoption, I threw myself into finishing college. I became a teacher, married a wonderful man who fully supported my desire to find you someday, and had 2 more children, your half-siblings Emma and Liam. She pulled out her phone to show me pictures: a kind-faced man with salt and pepper hair, a young woman in her 20s who shared my smile, a slightly younger man who had Linda's auburn hair, my biological family strangers who shared my DNA. "They know about you," Linda said. "We've always been open about the fact that I had a baby before I met Tom. They would love to meet you whenever you're ready." As our conversation continued, I found myself drawn to Linda's warmth and genuine joy at finding me. There was no pretense, no conditions, just an authentic desire to know who I had become. She asked about my life, my career, my interests, and actually listened to the answers, her eyes lighting up when I described my work with pediatric patients. "You became exactly who you were meant to be," she said. "I'm so proud of you, even though I can't take any credit for the amazing woman you are." We parted with plans to meet again and a tentative agreement that I would come to Portland soon to meet the rest of her family. As I watched her walk away, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: grief for the relationship we had missed, joy at the connection we had found, and hope for what might develop between us. This meeting was just the beginning of what would become my chosen family. Taylor had always been more of a sister to me than Amanda ever was, but now I began to cultivate other meaningful connections as well. My colleagues at the hospital, particularly those in the pediatric ward, who had shown me such kindness during my birthday crisis. A support group for adult adoptees that I joined at Dr. Morgan's suggestion. Linda and her family, who welcomed me with an openness my adoptive family had never managed. Meanwhile, I made another significant change. Using savings I had accumulated over years of careful budgeting, I put a down payment on a small house in the Fremont neighborhood of Seattle. It was nothing like my parents' mansion, just 2 bedrooms with a tiny backyard, but it was entirely mine, a space where I could define myself on my own terms. As I settled into my new home, I found unexpected pleasure in making decisions based solely on my own preferences. I painted the living room a bold teal that my mother would have deemed too bohemian. I filled bookshelves with novels and medical texts rather than the art books and family photos my parents displayed. I planted wildflowers in the yard instead of the carefully manicured roses my mother preferred. At work, I found myself speaking up more, advocating for my patients with newfound confidence. My supervisor noticed the change and offered me the opportunity to lead a new initiative focused on emotional support for long-term pediatric patients. It was exactly the kind of project that energized me, and I threw myself into it with enthusiasm. Throughout this period of growth and discovery, my adoptive family remained largely absent from my life. My mother called occasionally, usually with thinly veiled attempts to bring me back into the fold without addressing any of the issues I had raised. My father sent a formal email acknowledging my request for space and assuring me that the door remains open when you're ready. Amanda texted sporadically, usually selfies of her growing baby bump with captions like, "Your nephews miss you." None of them seemed to understand that what I needed wasn't space but change, a fundamental shift in how they saw me and related to me. Since that seemed unlikely to happen, I focused instead on building a life rich with people who did see me, who valued me for exactly who I was, rather than what role I could play in their narratives. Dr. Morgan called this process creating a chosen family, and it proved to be deeply healing, as I developed connections based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The ache of my adoptive family's conditional love began to lessen. I stopped checking my phone for messages from them. I stopped rehearsing imaginary conversations where they finally acknowledged their treatment of me. I stopped measuring my worth against their inability to see it. Instead, I began to develop new birthday traditions that honored myself. I took the day off work and spent it doing things that brought me joy. I started a personal ritual of writing a letter to myself each birthday, acknowledging my growth and setting intentions for the year ahead. Small acts of self-celebration that gradually rewrote the narrative of birthdays as days of disappointment. As the months passed, I found myself thinking less about what I had lost or never had, and more about what I was creating for myself. A life authentically mine built on my own values, rather than an endless striving for approval I would never receive. And through it all, an idea began to take shape, something that would eventually become the something that would shock my family to their core. 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, I stood in the reception area of what had once been a small medical office building in Seattle's Wallingford neighborhood. The space had been completely transformed, walls painted in soothing colors, comfortable furniture, arranged in welcoming groups, a play area visible through glass doors at the back. A sign above the reception desk read, "Bridges Pediatric Wellness Center," and beneath it, in smaller text, specializing in support for adopted and foster children and their families. This was my something, a pediatric clinic focusing specifically on the unique medical and emotional needs of adopted children. The idea had come to me gradually as I processed my own adoption story and connected with other adult adoptees. So many of us had experienced similar issues: identity questions, feelings of abandonment, difficulties with attachment, even medical problems that had been complicated by incomplete family histories. What if there was a place that understood these challenges and was equipped to address them from both medical and emotional perspectives? I had taken the idea to my supervisor at the hospital, expecting skepticism. Instead, she had been enthusiastically supportive, helping me develop a business plan and connecting me with potential investors. My experience as a pediatric nurse, combined with my personal background as an adoptee, gave me unique credibility in this niche. With financial backing from several hospital board members who saw the potential value of such a specialized clinic, I had been able to lease the space, hire a small initial staff, and prepare for our grand opening. Dr. Morgan had joined the team as our primary mental health consultant, bringing her expertise in family trauma to the project. Today was our official opening day, and a local news team was scheduled to arrive soon to do a feature story on the innovative concept behind Bridges. I had agreed to the publicity, reluctantly concerned about being in the spotlight, but recognizing that visibility would help us reach the families who needed our services. Taylor arrived just before the news crew, bringing coffee and moral support. "This place looks amazing, Brooke," she said, looking around the waiting room. "I still can't believe you pulled all this together in 6 months." "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, which was absolutely true. Taylor had spent countless evenings and weekends helping me paint, assemble furniture, and organize supplies. She had been my sounding board, reality checker, and cheerleader throughout the entire process. "Flattery will get you everywhere," she laughed. "But seriously, I'm so proud of you. You've taken something painful and transformed it into something that will help so many kids." Before I could respond, the receptionist, Sophie's mother, whom I had hired specifically for her warm personality and natural empathy, announced that the news crew had arrived. The next hour passed in a blur of cameras, questions, and tours of the facility. The reporter seemed genuinely impressed with the concept, asking thoughtful questions about the specific health concerns of adopted children and the importance of trauma-informed care. "What inspired you to create Bridges?" she asked finally as we stood in my office for the concluding interview segment. I had prepared for this question, crafting an answer that was honest without being too personal. As an adoptee myself, I understand the unique challenges these children face, and as a pediatric nurse, I've seen how those challenges can impact physical and emotional health. Bridges is about providing comprehensive care that addresses both the medical and psychological aspects of adoption. And what would you say to families who might be hesitant to seek specialized care? Some might worry about stigmatizing their adopted children by treating them differently. I'd say that acknowledging differences isn't the same as stigmatizing, I replied. Adopted children have unique histories and sometimes unique needs. Addressing those specifically doesn't mean treating the children as other. It means seeing them fully and providing the best possible support for their individual circumstances. The reporter nodded thoughtfully. "That's a powerful perspective. Thank you for sharing your vision with us." After the news crew packed up and left, promising that the story would air on that evening's news, Taylor and I collapsed onto the waiting room sofa. "That wasn't so bad," Taylor said. "You were articulate, passionate, and managed not to cry even once." I laughed, nudging her with my shoulder. "Setting a low bar there, but thanks." Seriously though, you did great. This place is going to make such a difference. I looked around at what we had created, feeling a sense of accomplishment unlike anything I'd experienced before. I hope so. The rest of the day was busy with final preparations for our first patient scheduled to begin the following morning. By evening, Taylor and I were exhausted but satisfied with what we had accomplished. Want to come over and watch the news segment? She offered as we locked up. I'll order that Thai food you like. I was about to accept when my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Amanda, the first I'd received in weeks that wasn't a baby bump update. Just saw you on the 5 o'clock news. Call me. Before I could decide how to respond, another text came through, this one from my father. Impressive interview. The clinic looks excellent. And finally, one from my mother. Why didn't you tell us about this? We're your family. I showed the texts to Taylor, who raised her eyebrows. Interesting timing. They ignore you for months, then suddenly want to talk when you're on TV. That's a bit harsh, I said, though part of me wondered if she was right. So what are you going to do? She asked. I considered the question. 6 months ago, I might have jumped at this apparent olive branch, eager for any sign that my family finally saw me. Now I felt more cautious, but also more secure in myself. I think I'll text Amanda back, see what she wants to talk about, but I'm not going to drop everything to respond to them. Taylor nodded approvingly. Growth. I love to see it. I sent a brief reply to Amanda. Thanks for reaching out. I'm free tomorrow evening if you'd like to talk. To my parents, I sent nothing for now. Their messages didn't actually require a response, and I was no longer operating on their timetable. Taylor and I went to her apartment, ate Thai food, and watched the news segment, which turned out to be remarkably well done. The reporter had captured the essence of what Bridges was trying to achieve, and the footage showed the clinic in its best light. The following day was busy with our first patients' families, who had been referred by colleagues at the hospital, or who had seen the website we had launched a month earlier. By evening, I was tired but exhilarated by the positive responses we had received. I had almost forgotten about Amanda's text until I checked my phone during a brief break and saw her reply, "Can I come to your place? There's something I want to discuss in person." This was unexpected. Amanda had never visited my new house, had shown no interest in where or how I was living since our confrontation. Curiosity won out over caution, and I gave her my address, suggesting she come around 7. At precisely 7 o'clock, a car pulled into my driveway. To my surprise, it wasn't just Amanda who emerged, but my parents as well. They stood awkwardly at my door, a strange trio. My mother still perfectly coiffed, despite the family's financial troubles, my father looking older than I remembered, and Amanda now visibly pregnant with twins. "We saw your clinic on the news," my mother said by way of greeting. "It was quite impressive." "Thank you," I replied, stepping back to let them enter. "Would you like to come in?" They filed into my modest living room, taking in the decor with varying expressions of surprise. It was so different from the formal, professionally designed spaces they were accustomed to. "It's very you," Amanda said, which I chose to take as a compliment. We sat in uncomfortable silence settling over us until my father cleared his throat. "The reporter mentioned you're an adoptee yourself. That was quite public." "It's part of who I am," I replied. "I'm not ashamed of it." "Of course not," my mother said quickly. "We just weren't expecting to hear about it on the evening news." I raised an eyebrow. "Would you have preferred I consulted you first? We haven't exactly been in regular communication." Another awkward silence followed, broken finally by Amanda. "We saw the clinic and realized, we've never really seen you before. Not really, not for who you are." This unexpected admission caught me off guard. "What do you mean? The woman on TV?" My father said, "The one talking about understanding adopted children because she's been there herself, creating a whole center to help others. That woman was confident, articulate, passionate. Nothing like the quiet, accommodating daughter we thought we knew." "I've always been this person," I said quietly. "You just never looked closely enough to see it." My mother's eyes filled with tears, something I had rarely witnessed. "You're right. And I'm sorry, Brooke. We've been so wrapped up in our own narratives that we missed who you actually are." I wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected apology. Part of me wanted to embrace it immediately, to finally have the recognition I had craved for so long. But another part, the stronger part now, was cautious. "What brought this on?" I asked. "Besides seeing me on TV." My parents exchanged glances. "Your mother and I have been in counseling," my father said, clearly uncomfortable with the admission. "The financial problems with the company, the situation with Amanda and Jason, it all came to a head. The therapist suggested we examine other patterns in our family dynamics as well." "And we realized how terribly we've treated you," my mother added. "Not just at the barbecue, but throughout your life. We had no right to make you feel less valuable because you weren't biologically ours." Amanda leaned forward. "I've been seeing someone too. Pregnancy hormones," she added with a self-deprecating laugh. "But seriously, I've been thinking a lot about the kind of mother I want to be, and I keep coming back to what happened to you. I don't want my children to ever feel like one matters more than the other." I listened to their words, noting that they seemed genuine, but I had spent too many years accepting surface apologies that led to no real change. "I appreciate what you're saying," I said carefully, "but one conversation can't undo decades of patterns. I need to see consistent change over time." "That's fair," my father acknowledged. "We're not asking for immediate forgiveness, just an opening, a chance to try again to do better." I considered this. "I can give you that. But my boundaries remain. I've built a life that works for me with people who see and value me. I'm not going to compromise that." "We understand," my mother said, though I wondered if she truly did. "We just want to be part of your life again on whatever terms you set." The conversation continued more open and honest than any we had ever had. My parents shared more about their financial situation. They had indeed sold the Bellevue house and moved to a much smaller condo. Amanda admitted that she and Jason were in couples counseling, trying to work through his fears about parenthood and her anxieties about losing her identity to motherhood. I found myself sharing more about Bridges, about the vision I had for helping children navigate the complexities of adoption and foster care. To my surprise, they listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and offering congratulations that felt sincere rather than performative. When they finally left 2 hours later, I felt cautiously optimistic. Not that everything was magically fixed, I knew better than that, but that perhaps there was potential for a new kind of relationship, one based on who we actually were rather than who we had pretended to be. As I watched their car pull away, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From a forgotten birthday to founding a clinic. From seeking validation to creating value. From feeling invisible to standing fully in my own light. The path forward with my family would likely be complicated with steps forward and back. But for the first time, I felt I was engaging with them from a position of strength rather than need. My worth was no longer dependent on their recognition. I had found it within myself and in the connections I had built with those who saw me clearly. And in that realization was perhaps the deepest lesson of all. Healing doesn't mean forgetting or even necessarily forgiving. It means reclaiming your story and writing the next chapters on your own terms. Life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. Today, a year after the birthday barbecue that changed everything, I celebrated turning 33 surrounded by my chosen family. Taylor colleagues from Bridges Linda and her family who drove up from Portland, and even Dr. Morgan, whose professional relationship had evolved into friendship. My biological family was there too, still learning how to truly see me but making genuine efforts. As I blew out the candles on a cake that was actually for me, I made a wish not for validation or recognition, but for the strength to keep walking my own path wherever it might lead. Because ultimately that's the greatest gift I've given myself. The knowledge that I am enough exactly as I am. Have you ever experienced a moment when you felt invisible in your own family? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the family we create is as important as the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always know your true worth.